Do a review in Likutei Sichos in Chelik Lamed Beis. This is the first Sicha for the Parsha Shmini. It's a Rashi Sicha, and actually a very short, relatively short Sicha. And the Rebbe explains the pasuk in discussing the various different korbanos that were made in the Shmini L'Meluim. So the pasuk says over there, Vayishchat es ha'olah, so that he shechted the korban olah. Aaron shechts the olah, and his sons participated. It says vayamtziu bnei Aaron eloves hadom. The bnei Aaron were mamtzi, and that's the Rashi. What does mamtzi mean? As we'll see in a minute, they vayamtziu. The sons of Aaron were yamtziu to Aaron as Adom. So Aaron goes and sprinkles the blood that the Bnei Aaron were mamtzi around the Mizbeach. So what is the meaning of vayamtziu? Maitik Rashi tevos vayamtziu. So Rashi quotes the words vayamtziu mefarish loshin hoshtha והזמנה. Vayamtziu means he stretched out, they handed, and they prepared. So the Bnei Aaron handed the blood, and they prepared the blood for Aaron to take it. So the Rebbe explains this pasuk that Rashi is explaining over here, that Rashi is saying basically two things over here. That Rashi is saying that they passed to him, hoshtha, they stretched and passed him the blood. And Rashi also says they prepared. And the Rebbe's question evolves around, what is this preparation over here that Rashi is talking about? And why was there necessary a preparation? The Rebbe will explain eventually that in this case, the involvement of the Bnei Aaron was in such a way that they prepared it. We want to emphasize the extent of the involvement of the Bnei Aaron. In another pasuk, it says just vayikrivu. Vayikrivu means that they brought close to Aaron. By the previous korban, when the pasuk over there uses the loshon vayikrivu bnei Aaron as Adom, over there they brought the blood closer to him, because after they brought the blood, Aaron still had to dip in the finger to sprinkle it on the mizbeach. But over here, there was no extra step of dipping a finger into the blood to sprinkle on the mizbeach. But once they passed the vessel with the blood to Aaron, that was already prepared. Now he can just throw it on the mizbeach. And therefore, the pasuk writes here, vayamtziu, in order to emphasize the involvement of the Bnei Aaron, that not only did they bring it close, but actually they prepared it, and that's the extent. And that was only in this case when it talks about the Olah, Masha'enke, when it talks about the Chatas. Over there says vayikrivu. Let's look inside. Again, let's start over. Aleph, the pasuk vayishchat es ha'olah, when it says in the verse that he shechted, that was the second korban in the Shmini Lamiluim. So the pasuk says vayamtziu bnei Aaron eloves hadom vayizregeu al mizbeach sovim. So the bnei Aaron were mamtzi to Aaron the blood, and he threw it on, sprinkled it on the mizbeach. Maitik Rashi tevos vayamtziu. Rashi quotes the word vayamtziu mefarish loshin hoshtha v'hazmana. It means of passing it and preparing. Kavonas Rashi bepashtus is, so what is Rashi trying to tell us here? Lefarish tevas vayamtziu, to interpret, explain what the word of yamtziu. That's what it comes out. The Rebbe later on will explain that Rashi is really trying to explain the change of Lashon. That by the Chatas, before it says vayikrivu and it says vayamtziu. But at the first glance, the Rebbe says when we read the pasuk with the Rashi, turns out it seems like Rashi is trying to explain what vayamtziu is. Now, normally metzia means finding something. Over here, there's nothing to be found. So shaloi tei moshe inyonim meloshem metzia. Don't say that this comes from the language metzia vayamtziu they found. And this is actually the interpretation of the Even Ezra, al derech pirush harav Even Ezra, Khan. He says it migzedas motzah vayamtziu comes from the root of motzah finding. Shemotzoi b'shas hatzorech. He found it. Aaron found it when he needed it. He needed the blood. So vayamtziu, they made him have it, that it was found to him when he needed. That's how the Even Ezra types. Rashi wants to tell you that's not the root of the word vayamtziu. Hainu, according to the Even Ezra, shebnei Aaron gormu sha'adom yiyeh motzu etzel Aaron, that the sons of Aaron were the cause, vayamtziu, they caused the blood to be found by Aaron. So vayamtziu means found, but Rashi says no, elhu loshin hoshtah v'hazmana. But vayamtziu means they passed out, stretched out. They stretched it to Aaron. But the question is, if the type of vayamtziu means hoshtah, why does Rashi have to add hazmana, prepared? Vayamtziu, that is stretched out to him, gave it to him, passed it to him. Rashi, but we need an explanation, the double words in Rashi. Loshin hashmot hoshtah v'hazmana, the language of to stretching out and preparing. It would be sufficient to say he stretched out. Vayamtziu means hoshtah, to stretch out, to pass to. The Rebbe says not only is hoshtah already enough, and we don't need to say hazmana, but hazmana is different than hoshtah. Hoshtah v'hazmana harim shnei inyonim sheinim. This is shoinim. These are two separate, because hoshtah muvana havora misinesinas miyad liyad. To stretch out means to pass, to give from one hand, stretch it out from one hand to the other hand. So the Kohanim, the Bnei Aaron, stretched out and gave it to the hands of Aaron. That's the meaning of hoshtah. The hazmana, on the other hand, to prepare pirushei hachana. That means that they prepared it. She hechinu es adam. They got the dam ready for Aaron. So why do we have to say vayamtziu koilel shnei inyonim? Does this vayamtziu includes two things? It means they passed it and they prepared it. Loshin hoshtah v'hazmana. Why does Rashi also have to say v'hazmana over here? So if it's only explaining the meaning of vayamtziu means he passed it, he stretched it out, he gave it to them. Why does Rashi have to say that he prepared it? And the Rebbe says, yes, that actually, maybe he's trying to say they stretched it out, and that allowed that it should be prepared. So they, vayamtziu means that they passed it to him. But through the fact that they passed it to Aaron, so then it was prepared. Bepashtus kavonas Rashi bazel levayer. Rashi intended, we can say simply that Rashi is trying to explain that this passing that they get, that was in such a way that vayamtziu, which means that they prepared it. The fact that you stretch it and you pass it to your friend, naset, the Bnei Aaron passed it to Aaron, so nasa dover muchan u'mezuman u'motzri etzlei. So it became prepared and ready and found by him. He has it now. So we're also going to touch the word motzui. Really, it means that you're stretching it to make it found so that you prepared it. So really, it's going to be the same, almost like the Even Ezra, that it comes from the Lashon of Matsui that he has it. But how does it have it? Through stretching it when the Bnei Aaron passed it to him. They stretched it and they gave it to him. Al derech pirush harav, okay, now this is be similar to the Rabbi Even Ezra. So the Matsui is the main that hazmona, that he has it ready, that it's found by him. And how? By vayamtziu, by passing it to him. But avol l'cheira ein ze biur maspik. That's not a sufficient explanation, the Rebbe says. The mishum kach lo hoyo tzorich Rashi l'hadgish shehoyo ma'isa hazmona davke. Rashi did not need to emphasize that this prepared it. If Rashi wants to explain the word motzui, that it was found by him through passing, so Rashi should have said Loshen hazmona sheyemotzui, not has. I mean Loshen hashota sheyemotzui. Hazmona is a whole nother that is prepared now, but that's not the type of vayamtziu. That's an additional point. Why does Rashi have to emphasize there was a act which prepared it? Rashi should have said Loshen hashota sheyemotzui is stretched so that it's over there found. Similar to the Lashon of the Even Ezra, that he passed it so that it will be found. So it still means motzui, vayamtziu, they made it found, through their passing. Or how did they make it found? When they passed it. But why does Rashi have to emphasize that they prepared it? Shepirushay, according to the Even Ezra, means etzem imotzei shel hadover. They made it found that it's here, that it's how now. Whether it's prepared or not is not important. It's just that it's here. Without distinction, how is it found by him? In love, if that made it ready, they prepared it, didn't prepare it. But the main thing is, now he has it, is vayamtziu. They stretched it out so he can act. Why does Rashi emphasize its stretching out and the preparation? The Rebbe questions over here, why is Rashi saying this hazmana? Somehow Rashi adds this preparation that Rashi wants to explain, wants to add. And the Rebbe explains that this hazmana that Rashi adds is actually to explain not the meaning of vayamtziu. Vayamtziu means taket, the stretch that he has it. But hazmana explains to us why take does the pasuk use the lashon of vayamtziu versus the lashon of vayikrivu? As we see now, the Rebbe will explain. Base, so we can say shekavonas Rashi that Rashi's intention is lo irak lefarish tevas vayamtziu. She's not coming just to explain the meaning, the taich, the translation of the word vayamtziu. But mainly litaritz shinui b'lashoin aksuvim kan, but to answer a change in the language of the verses here. Li'il gabe hakrovas egel hachatos shel arim. Before, in the previous korban, first they brought the chatas. So when we talk about the egel hachatos of Aaron, Nemar, over there it says, Vayikra Aaron el hamizbeach. So Aaron came close to the mizbeach. And vayishchat, and he shechted the korban. And then it says, vayikrivu b'nei Aaron es Hadom eid love. So the b'nei Aaron brought the blood to Aaron. Vayitbol etzboi badam, so he dips his finger in the blood. Vayitin al karnas of mizbeach, and he puts it on the corners of the mizbeach. So before it says that the bnei Aaron brought close the dam, and then he dipped his finger in the dam and he put it on the mizbeach. But the kan gabe ha'olah medayik hakosu. But here when it talks about the olah, the pasuk says specifically. Torah doesn't say, it says, Vayishchat es olah, he shechted the olah. But then it says, vayamtziu b'nei Aaron le'olah v'esadom vayizrikeyu. It doesn't say, vayikrivu b'nei Aaron. It says, vayamtziu b'nei Aaron le'olah v'esadom vayizrikeyu, and he sprinkled it. It changes from the Lashon. Here we have a Lashon of vayamtziu versus vayikrivu, like we said before. And this Lashon is repeated again in the Hemshech of the Psukim. V'gam be'posuk shel ha'acharei zeh medayik, and also the pasuk afterwards, there is a emphasis. The pasuk says specifically, "V'asa olah himtziu olah l'nisachah." The olah, they were mamtzi to him with the pieces. It doesn't say the olah they brought close to the pieces. Why we're talking about himtziu and vayamtziu? And also by the third korban, the shlomim that follows, the shlomim that was for the people, Nemar lekamon also says later on, vayamtziu b'nei Aaron es Hadom elov, that they had the dom mamtzi to him. The time of boy, it needs a reason. So Rashi is bothered by, the Rebbe explains now, not just trying to explain what the meaning of the word vayamtziu, but why the pasuk changes from vayikrivu, which is said by the korban Chatas of Aaron, and now when we're talking about the korban Olah, the pasuk doesn't say vayikrivu, it says vayamtziu, and with the pieces what he brought on the mizbeach, it also says vayamtziu. And later on by the Shlomim, it says vayamtziu. Why the change between vayikrivu and vayamtziu? Now, vayikrivu means they bought close. And the Rebbe says maybe the fact was, when we're talking about the korban of Aaron, lechatchila, the korban Chatas, maybe over there, because they were a distant, they had to bring it closer. Over here, they were close enough just to stretch it, so maybe that's why it's vayamtziu. So the Rebbe says like this: Bepashtus yesh leimar. Simply, one can answer the difference in the languages. Shekein hoysam etzias. That was the fact. The fact. Shalachare kabolas dam hachatos. After the receiving of the blood of the Chatas, they weren't standing next to Aaron, couldn't just stretch it to him because they were further away. They needed to bring it to him. That's why they need to bring it close to bring him the blood. As opposed to the blood of the Olah, which we're talking about now, the Shlomim Asher La'om later on, Pasuk uses vayamtziu. Hoysa b'kiriv mokim la'Aaron, they were close to Aaron. They didn't have to bring it to him. And they're able to stretch and give him the blood and also the limbs to Aaron. And that's why, so the language of the pasuk, there you had to bring it because you were far away. That was the fact. And here they were close, so they can just stretch it. But that take answers the language, but it wouldn't answer why take was it made in such a case. The Rebbe says, "Aval im she'abir zeh meyashiv hashini b'loshen haksuvim kan." Even though that explains the language of the psukim over here, why it says vayikrivu and then it says vayamtziu. But we don't understand still in the content of the idea, the why did not the Bnei Arin take part in bringing it close to, they only stretched it out. Le'il b'tchilas parshas Vayikra, in the beginning of the portion of Vayikra, b'dinei Olah, when it talks about the Olah Nemar, it says, v'shochat desben habokor lifnei Hashem. The Shchita, anybody can do the Shchita, so even Azar, you shech the ben habokor before Hashem. But then the Pasuk says, vayikrivu b'nei Arin hakoyanim es Adon. Who gets, after you shecht it, you receive the blood, and the Bnei Arin bring the blood close. V'zorku es Adon al mizbeach gomer, they sprinkle the blood on the mizbeach, etc. And Rashi explains, so what does it mean, vayikrivu? They bring it close. Zu Kabbalah, that's receiving. They bring it close. First they receive it. Shehi Arishayna, the first thing you have to accept the blood, receive the blood. When you shech from the animal, the blood that runs from the animal goes into the Kabbalah, into the Keli. Umishmo loshen elocha. And it also means, also has the meaning of leading it to. You receive it and lead it. Lamadnu sheshteim b'bnei Arin. We learned that both of these avodas needs to done the bnei Arin. The shchita can be done by Azar, but vayikrivu is bnei Arin. The Kabbalah and the Elocha. Lamadnu sheshteim b'nei Arin kulim. Loshen vayikrivu koilel shtei ha'avodas. The language of vayikrivu includes these two services: shel Kabbalah sadam, receiving the blood, and leading the blood. These are both done by the sons of Aaron the Kohanim. They have to do this. So based on this, it's surprising. So after Kivon Shakosuv Kan Bolitayr. Since the pasuk here is coming to describe the participation of Aaron's sons in the services of the 8th day of the inauguration, how they are part of the avodah. So madua gabe ha'olah v'hashlomim. So how come by the olah and then later by the shlomim? Hishmit hakosuv al dvar shtei avodas elu. The Torah emits these two avodas, Kabbalah v'Elocha. Why is there no mention of the vayikrivu, of receiving and bringing it? Vayamtziu, it just said they passed along as Adom. That they gave it to Aaron's hand. It doesn't say that they received it. It doesn't say that they let it. There's no akrova, just vayamtziu. Now, the fact that they are passing, stretching the blood and giving it to Aaron, maybe that qualifies as halacha, because they're still giving it. But we would still be missing. So there's a question, halacha, can that be qualified? You're not doing it by foot, you're just passing it. Is that called leading the blood? Are you fulfilling the vayikrivu that is by the korban that we learned in the Parshas Olah in the beginning of Vayikra? By stretching it, is that halacha? In halacha, that may not qualify. But maybe in Pshuta Shel Mikra, just stretching it means you're leading the blood. But certainly we don't have a mention over here that they received the blood. So why would the Torah not tell us the vayikrivu? So the Rebbe explains like this. So, Rebbe, how come we don't find in the pasuk telling us they did that Avodah Kapola and Hilocha? But again, Hilocha yesh leimar. As far as Hilocha, we can say shal pi pshute shal mikra, according to the simple meaning of the pasuk. Gam shotas hadam. Also, when you just stretch the blood, miyad liyad, from the hand of the bnei Aaron to the kohen to Aaron, nichlelas begeder ha'ilocha. This is part defined as leading it. It's a locha. Because by stretching it, you are actually bringing it closer to the mizbeach, so that qualifies. So even though it just says vayamtziu, but this was hiloch. And the Rebbe says, according to halacha, there is place for debate. Does such expression, passing, stretching out, passing over, does it qualify? Is it called hilocha? Yesh Allah Shem Elocha. Is it called hilocha? Shari Kaimalon. Because we know the halacha is hilocha shalei beregel lav shmo halacha. If you're carrying it not with your feet, in the Gemara in Zvachim, that's not called leading it. Uladas Rambam, and according to the view of the Rambam, afilu kshoemet b'tzad hamizbeach. Even if you're next to the mizbeach, you cannot just put it on the mizbeach. Tzorich liyis hilocha beregel. You need to go by foot before you're mekayim, before you sprinkle it on the mizbeach. So you need to mamish go by foot. So this would not qualify halachically. Ubetzofnas paneich al Torah kosav, and in the tzofnas paneich on the Torah writes zeh shebnei Aaron rak himtziu as hadom, that they just gave the blood without walking. This was not according to halacha, which normally requires halacha. So, aderech halacha, we can question, debate this. Avol aderech hapshat lo yimatzinu shehalacha tzarich liis beregel davke. But on the simple literal level, we don't find. You have to bring it closer. What difference does it make by foot or you stretching it? The entire idea that you have to lead it, it comes from bringing it closer. Mistaber, so logically, according to literal level, when you stretch it out, you're bringing it closer. That way, you're bringing the blood closer to the mizbeach. But this doesn't answer about receiving the blood. But simply, it's not included. Yamtziu stretch doesn't say that they received it. Only when it says vayikrivu, over there we say that vayikrivu means the Kabbalah, which is the first. Ube frat, so it's only, but not by vayamtziu. Ube frat, says the Rebbe, sheyesh loymar shekabolas adam nichlelas, that even receiving the blood is included. Gam b'mashmoas haloshen shel vayikrivu. It's also the meaning of the word vayikrivu, even though this is Kabbalah, because the beginning kekabolas adam he has cholas kiruv adam el mizbeach, because receiving the blood is the beginning of bringing the blood to the mizbeach. So that is when it says vayikrivu, mashenke vayamtziu shalosh noishoto, when it says they passed it over, that doesn't include hirak pulas hanesunim yad liyad. That only reflects the giving it from hand to hand. Aaron gave it to Aaron. Umuman she'en kabbalas adam b'chlal zeh. So the kabbalas adam is not included. So the question is, why does the Torah omit this part of the Kohanim? V'im kein tomua madua nokat akosu loshem vayamtziu. So why does the Torah? So first of all, it's a change from before. And second of all, it should, by right, it should say vayikrivu, because that would include the kabbalas adam. Mela the hilocha, you say, is included, but it should say vayikrivu to include the kabbalas adam. So madua nokat akosu loshem vayamtziu. Why does it pasuk use loshem vayamtziu mashmit al dvar kabbalas adam, and it omits about the receiving of the blood. Why doesn't it say like before? Vayikrivu. That would include both the Kabbalah and the Halacha. And we should record that. So even if you want to say that they were next to the Mizbeach, but that would mean that they can't really. But where is the receiving of the blood? We don't have over here. So the Torah doesn't always have to write every detail. If the Torah doesn't write about it, we would say there was the Akrava. They don't have to repeat. But the Torah writes vayamtziu. Why say vayamtziu instead of vayikrivu, and therefore omit two important parts of the avodah? Bishloimo im lo yanichta b'Torah b'chlal advar hapulis sheben shchita lizrika. If the Torah would not have described or written about the actions taken in between the shechting and the sprinkling, lo hoya kosher, then it wouldn't be difficult. Why the Torah omits that? Because we're not talking Torah has to write everything. We find so many in other places. We don't have the details of all the services that were done by the korban, only some of them. But this pasuk has already come down, is giving you details. It says it's shechted, then it says vayamtziu. That the bnei Aaron, they provided matziu the dam to Aaron, kosher kenal. So why does he omit about the receiving the blood? So basically, Rashi wants to know. Rashi has a problem. Why did we change from vayikrivu to vayamtziu? Especially if vayamtziu does not include the Kabbalah Saddam, which was one of the avodas. And if the Torah says vayamtziu, why not say also the Kabbalah Saddam, which is included in the word vayikrivu? As the Rebbe says, vayikrivu inherently could mean Kabbalah Saddam because that brings it closer. Vayamtziu is just the act of stretching it and doesn't have the Kabbalah Saddam. Why would the Torah admit that? This is what Rashi is coming to answer. Rashi, Loshon, Hoshtah, והזמנה. As Rashi says, also prepared. This explains the novelty, what's so special when vayamtziu, which is more than vayikrivu. Dafke when it's vayamtziu, there is the idea of preparation. If we want to talk about the participation of the bnei Aaron in this process, it is better explained by using the word vayamtziu rather than vayikrivu. Because vayikrivu, bringing close, means that Aaron still has to do something. So they're not fully participating. Aaron still has to take his finger and dip it into the blood and then sprinkle it. Over here, they're participating to such an extent that vayamtziu, they stretched it out and now it's ready. All he has to do is sprinkle it on the mizbeach. Let's look inside. That's the explanation. Gimel. Biksuvim kan mefurish yesh chiluk bein zrikas dam achatos zrikas dam ha'olah v'ashlam. This psukim, there's a very clear distinction between the process of the sprinkling of the blood of Chatas, the first korban, and the sprinkling of the blood of Olah, which we're talking about, and the shlomim that follow. The Bechatas nemar vayitbal etzbo badom. By the Chatas, it says he dipped his finger in the blood. Vayiten al karnes mizbeach, and he gave it on the corners of the mizbeach. Ve'ilu ba'olah shlomim. On the other hand, by the Olah and shlomim, Nemar stam, vayizrikei al mizbeach. He threw it on the mizbeach. No dipping of the fingers. Klemer. Zrikas dam achatos ibe'etzbat. The sprinkling of the blood of the chatas with the finger. V'lochein tzarich hakoyen lidbel etzboi badam. He has to dip it into the blood because he needs to sprinkle with the finger. Tchila. First, he needs to dip his finger into the blood. V'achkach lizrikei, then to sprinkle it. Mashenkin zrikas dam ha'olah v'ashlomim. As opposed to the sprinkling of the blood of the oil and the shlomim, he bekeli. That's with the dish in which the blood is. You don't need to dip the finger in the blood. So it turns out, Bedama Chatos, what the act of Arin accomplished when the blood of the Chatos, which they bring it close, but Aaron still has to do another job, dip his finger into the blood, and and what they did when, in their act that they did by the dam of the oil and the shlomim, which once they gave it to Aaron, ready to sprinkle. By the blood of the Chatas, even after they brought the blood close to Aaron, the blood was not yet ready and prepared to be sprinkled. Was still lacking that act of Aaron putting his finger into the blood and sprinkling it. As opposed to by the blood of the oil and the shlom. As soon as they stretched the blood and gave it to Aaron, the blood is prepared and ready to sprinkle. Oh, he has the dish, doesn't have to do anything else. Aaron had no need to do anything additional. So it's prepared. So now we understand why the pasuk uses not vayikrivu but vayamtziu. Hatam she'aTorah misaperes al dvar pulos bnei Aaron bekarbonos elu hu bepashtus. What is the Torah telling us? What the bnei Aaron did to tell us their involvement in their part in it. Kidei lahadish es hishtatfusom, to emphasize their participation b'avedos shel Aaron b'yimzeh, Aaron's service in this day. That's why the pasuk emphasizes that in the pasuk wants to emphasize when it came to the oil and the shlomim, it was greater the participation in the Aaron's service. It's not only that they made it close to him and then he had to do vayamtziu. What is the novelty? It's not just the way they did it. Instead of bringing it close, they stretched it. It accomplished by the blood. By the blood of the Olah, same thing by the Shlomim, they actually added a new thing. And they're prepared and ready for Zrika. That's why the Torah told vayamtziu. Same thing is with regards to the limb of the Olah. They prepared, they gave him to him together in its pieces. They are the one that's chopped it up to the pieces. In such a way, soon as these pieces came to the hands of Aaron, they were ready to bring it on the Mizbeach. This is Sichos Shabbos Parshas Shmini, Tovshin Membes.